Okay. All right, everybody. My connection was lagging, but here I am. Let me go ahead and move this stuff. All right, so let me see what's going on out there. I see quite a few people have decided to jump on with us. I don't expect too many people from Kentucky to join us because we're in the middle of the UK game, but that's okay. You guys can catch the replay. But let me go ahead and get started. This one is the last of the fruits of this series. And so let me show you what we're going to work on today. It won't take us that long. This is a small block, and let me show you what we've got. If you haven't started, guess what? You can go back in time and start from the beginning because you're going to be able to catch the replays. Okay. Welcome, my name is Yvonne, and we are working on the Fruits of the Spirit. This one is the self-control block, and the reason that I picked starfruit is because you really have to have self-control with starfruit. Technically, it's a neurotoxin, the things that make these things delicious. So if you have kidney problems, don't eat too many of these because that's not good for you. All right, but let's look at this quilt. We're getting to the end of this series. I'm going to make two smaller, maybe just one. It depends on how I work it out. But we have 12 of these smaller blocks, and I made them gray at the beginning. And several people have asked, what are those blocks going to be? Those blocks are going to be whatever you want them to be. And let me show you what I mean by that. Some of my blocks are, I bought a panel at the beginning, and some of my blocks are going to be these. These are printed. I bought these, but they were kind of small. And so these are now 6.5-inch blocks because that's what all of those are going to be. What I did is I cut my panel into each of the fruits of the spirit, and then I just added a jelly roll all the way around, and then I trimmed it to 6.5. And so I'm going to have, for each of the fruits of the spirit, each of the 9, I'm going to have these going in there. But that leaves me a couple of blocks that I need to fill in. And so one of those blocks that I'm going to be filling in is with these Dresdens. And you can't have fruit without flowers. 90% of the time, if you have a flowering plant, it bears fruit. And so I had a bunch of these partially finished little Dresdens, and I'm going to be adding these to my fruits of the spirit as flowers. And so I'm going to put those anywhere that I see kind of a barren spot on my quilt. I'm going to add these, and I think that's going to add a really pretty kind of finishing touch to mine. So I'm going to be adding these. I will show you how to make these in a different episode. I will go ahead and show you how to make these if you want to add these little flowers. So I have a bunch of mine. They're all scrappy. And I'm going to be adding this to my quilt along with leaves and vines and other things because I think that'll make the quilt, all the kind of blank spaces all over the quilt, make it look really finished. And so that's what we're doing next time in 2 weeks. But today we're going to work on the final block. And you need a 6.5-inch square for that. You need a little bit of fusible web to do your star. You have two options. You can either do the star center like this, where you trace it, or you can actually just trim out the center of the green and leave your background showing. So you can do it either way, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Like most of these, I have used Inktense blocks for mine. And so let me show you. Let me grab them. And I've used Inktense pencils and Inktense blocks. And for those of you who have not jumped in the series, I'll show you where we've been so far before we get started. So let me just pull this big stack here. And let me show you where we've been. We made an orange. We made a pineapple. We made a strawberry. We made a realistic pomegranate using those. Let me see, I made a pair of cherries to go with mine. Let me see what else. I need to quit licking my fingers. That's gross. I made a watermelon. And I've made a banana. Realistic looking banana. And that's it. That is what we have here. So I've made 2 of each of these blocks, and these are the blocks that are going to go in my finished quilt. But I have no more room for the big ones, so we're going to go ahead and make this into a small one. So let me get my ironing mat, and I'm going to grab, like I said, the little background. I'm going to use green for this. And so just like all the others, this is regular quilting cotton, and so I had a fat quarter in my sewing room. It's like mossy, pale, like 1930s green. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press this into place. And this is just the tracing on the back, the paper side fusible web. I took my image and I just traced it on the wrong side. So I flipped this over on my light and I traced it, and now I'm going to put it right here. So I'm going to move this out of my way. And with a hot dry iron, I'm going to use Pellon 805. You can use a different method of applique for this if you wanted to. You wanted to do a reverse applique, if you wanted to do an applique that uses interfacing, this would be fine for that because the shape is big and swoopy. So it's actually good for those kinds of tasks. And if you want me to show you that method, I can. But if you were watching me earlier, I also did it earlier when we were working on the Happy Carrot pillow. So sometimes I use the fusible web, and sometimes I use the interfacing. It just depends. The bigger the shape, the more likely I am to use the interfacing. The more corners you have, the less likely I am to use it. All right, so now that I have this, and you don't have to get fussy, it doesn't have to be super fussy, but it should just look like a starfruit. So just like that, like a starfish almost. And then I want to take and I want to make my middle. Now I have 2 options here. I could take and I could cut out the middle and let the background show like this. I'm going to show you the image because it has a lighter center, right? So I could technically take my scissor and cut that out and save myself a step. Or I could take this and use a different color and cut out that shape in the middle. I don't know. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut out the shape in the middle that looks like a star. So I think for this one, I'm going to cut out the shape. And so in order to do that, I'm going to need a very sharp seam ripper. And so I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to come up like this because I want to start that. And this is with the paper still on the back. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to give myself a spot to cut. Just because I want to save myself a step, and I don't want to end up with a quilt that's too stiff. All right, so now that I have this, I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to trim along this edge, and I'm just going to trim like this. And like I said, it doesn't have to look perfect. It should just give the impression of a starfruit. And so I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to come up the middle like this, and I'm just going to cut this like this. Doesn't have to be exact. You're not comfortable freestyling this kind of stuff, you can draw it. You can use a light box and put it in there. Okay. I'm going to remove that bit right there. I'm going to come back to center. I'm just going to remove that. Now I'm going to come back to the middle just like that. And I'm going to trim this off so that I'm leaving these edges like this. See it? Just leaving these edges open. Then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to come this way. I'm going to go back in the middle. And I'm just going to leave the edges out. All right, I'm going to come back this way. back to the middle. And I'm going to do it on this side as well. I'm just going to kind of come in from an angle until I reach that. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to cut out that inner shape. And so now comes the fun part. I'm going to kind of make it chubbier, right? And I'm going to make it look more like a star. And I'm going to come out like this. And I'm going to just give the impression of that star. Like this. So I'm just going to make a star inside a star. And it doesn't even have to be perfection, right? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give the impression of a starfruit. Okay. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to fuse that down. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to get myself a nice big needle. And I'm going to peel that. It doesn't peel enough, like this one is not acting like it wants to peel, then I might need to iron it some more. So I'm just going to take and press that paper. Baby, I didn't heat it up enough, and you just have to know how often to, how long to press yours, because it just depends, right? All right. So let that cool a second, and I'm going to work on this one. All right, who's out there? We have quite a few people, considering that, like I said, we're in the middle of a NCAA tournament and a lot of people are watching games. They're hosting parties. I am hosting a party in my sewing room. That's what I'm doing. All right, so now I'm going to pull this back. And it looks like it's cool enough that I can peel this off. There we go. You have to let it cool down, and you have to make sure that you have enough heat that that glue adheres. I'm just going to pull that off. And here we have it almost. Now, like I said, I could do it two ways. I could have fused a different color center, or I could do it this way. And if you ever have trouble peeling it, it could be that the fusible is old or that you did not iron it long enough. But either way, it's going to work out. I'm just going to peel it. Yep, one more on this side. And there we have it. All right. So now that all that stuff is gone, I'm going to move my needle out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the middle, just like that. I'm going to center it out, and I'm going to make sure that I have enough space all the way around. And always with an applique, you're going to want to center that before you fuse it. So now that I have it just like this, I'm going to go ahead and fuse that down. And now comes the fun part. I'm going to add the embellishment and the detail. All right, I'm going to move this stuff out of the way. I don't want to stain this up. And I'm going to leave this on my table. And so now I'm going to start adding detail with my Inktense. My particular starfruit had a darker border. So I'm going to make sure that that's pressed down. Make sure that I got all the paper. Nope, there's a tiny bit of paper there that I did not remove. So just take your time. Make sure you get all that paper off of there. I could tell right away that I left a little strip because it wasn't adhering like everything else. There we go. Now it's down. So this starfruit has a border that's darker. So I'm going to find some of these skinny markers, and I'm going to get this olivey color. Maybe this green one here. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a border just on the outside, just like this. And then when I come through here and get that wet, right now it's dry, so I'm dry on dry with my pencils. I'm adding a little bit of a border just to the outside. And these are washable ink pencils. This is permanent. Once you're done with this and these completely dry, you've gotten them wet and released the ink, they will dry permanent. There we go. I always add a little bit of starch to the back of this before I start to this fabric, just because it makes it stiff and it makes it easier to draw. All right, so now I have a little bit of water, and I'm going to get my fabric markers and I'm going to get this wet. So I'm going to put a little bit of water on this cap here. I'm just going to squirt some water. I have a little bit of water inside a cap, and I'm going to add this fabric marker here. We'll add some wetness. I'm going to dip that in the water and bring that along that edge. And what that's going to do is that's going to activate the water from the marker tip. We'll activate that, and that'll give me the line that I'm looking for. If I want a slightly darker line, I'll use a darker fabric marker, and these are fine tip tulip fabric markers, which are permanent. And it's just getting that moisture where I want it. And I love using these. They turn out really nice. If I want that to be darker, I can go back over it, make that darker, so that ink tints and that marker are joining together. And so now I have that little skinny border that I want. If I want to make it darker while it's still damp, I can come in here while this is still damp and I can release some more of this ink. Now it's wet on dry. I want to make a little bit more of a darkness. I'm using a slightly darker color. This one is called teal green. So it's like a teal blue if I wanted to make it a little bit darker. Have any of you guys gotten the pencils and played with them? The ink tints pencils? They're actually a lot of fun. And if I wanted to get even darker, I could get some of this forest green felt tip marker and come in here and add a little bit of green to that. And I like how that's looking. That's adding just a hint of green to the outside of that. And like I said, these are all fabric permanent markers. A lot of times young people use these to decorate their tennis shoes, to decorate clothing, their jeans. These are great if you have teens or preteens to let them decorate their stuff. And there I have the outside. So now I've got this inside that I need to deal with. And so one of the things that I'm going to do for that is I'm going to use the blocks. And I'm going to take this block and I'm going to line the inside. So I'm going to take, this is like a teal green block, and I'm just going to kind of mark the inside of this star with this right here. And so if it's not perfect, that's fine. And this is dry ink block, and it's going on there. And I'm just kind of coming along that edge. This is like a teal blue. And then I will release the ink when I add liquid to it. I've added this, and I've kind of painted the inside of that star the way I like. And I'm going to use my fine tip markers to add some seeds to mine. I'm going to add some seeds like this. I'm going to add a seed like this. Like I said, they don't have to be perfect. I'm going to add some seeds. I'm going to add, this one is a black. I'm going to add seeds like this. And I'm going to make my starfruit like that. And so now I'm liking how this starfruit is looking, and I'm going to add a little bit more water to this, and I'm going to grab a paintbrush from behind me, and I'm going to work that in with a paintbrush. And so I just keep big artist brushes like this, really soft brushes. And you just don't want a ton of water, and you're going to come along that edge like this to release that ink. And let it penetrate the fabric. You're just going to work that in just like that. And what I'm doing is literally painting my fabric. And I want that ink to spread to the inside. So I'm going to come and I'm going to pull any moisture towards the inside like this. And I love how this is looking. Anywhere that powder from those ink blocks is located, if once water gets on it, it will change color. So you want to be sure that you're brushing any excess off that you don't want, because you don't want it to get everywhere. I'm just moving that with my brush so that it kind of blends along that edge and creates like a watercolor effect along my starfruit. And I like the way this is looking. I'm kind of glad that I didn't add more fabric, because I think that this is looking better the way I have it like this. I don't know, what do you guys think? What do you think? Tell me in the comments if you like when I do it this way instead of the other way. All right, so now that I have it, I can let this dry and I could see if it needs more or less of my ink. And I can already tell you that it's probably going to need, up here in this top corner, I'm going to have to dab it like this. And I'm going to just dab these corners just to kind of give them emphasis. You see it right there? And the same with this one. Just as I round the corner, I'm going to do a little bit of shading and make that little corner a little bit darker. Now this dries a little bit lighter, so keep that in mind. You may have to go over it again. And there we go. And now I'm just blending that in. And there was some left over, so I'm going to fade it where it kind of, some of that powder splashed in, so I'm going to fade it in there. And I'm going to make it look intentional so that it doesn't look weird. And I'm going to let it run towards the middle like this, and I'm just going to fade it in. And so I'm painting with whatever's on my brush to the inside, and I like how this is looking. If I want to, I can add a little bit of yellow to the center of the starfruit if I want, just to kind of add a highlight. So I can come in here and add a little bit of yellow, because starfruit can be a little bit of a greeny yellow. So I'm going to come in here and add this. It looks kind of weird, but once I add it in there and let it dry, it'll be fine. I'm mixing this color in there, and I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to color it in like a greeny yellow. And I like how this is looking. There we go. You have to let these dry carefully. So now that I'm sitting here letting it dry, I'm going to go ahead and iron this. So I'm going to take a hot iron and put it on a little towel. I keep little washcloths around, and that's just to absorb the extra. And by hitting it with my iron, I'm heat setting all of that. The markers will bleed if you don't heat set them, so you have to heat set all of this stuff. There we go. And that faded on me a little bit because I didn't heat set it. So what I can do now to get rid of that a little bit is add a little bit of yellow around there to kind of fade that. And then come in with a little bit of water. I could actually even just spray it. Spraying it with my spray bottle. And I'm going to blend it. And you notice that middle stuff now is not bleeding anymore because it's been heat set. And I'm going to heat set it one more. And it's looking very dimensional. So I'm creating a fruit that looks very dimensional. And so I just run that iron on it back and forth. And I like how this is looking. If I want to add a little bit more to this, I could add a little bit more. But now my starfruit is looking the way I want it. And I kind of wish I had cut that off a little bit more, but I think it's looking okay. If I want to add a little bit of more dark green inside here, some of these little nooks, I can add a little bit of dark green. And that's from my fabric marker, but I think this is looking really good. I'm liking the way that this is looking. I'm going to add a little bit of dark green to the outside on this side. And I think that this is going to be looking pretty good. I like this starfruit. Take and heat set all of this. And once you heat set it for at least 60 seconds, then it becomes permanent. And so I'm using a nice hot dry iron. And you can press it from the back as well. You can see where some of that color bled to the other side, and that's okay. So I'm heat setting it. And as long as you don't wash it within 24 hours after you heat set it, then this is absolutely done. Look at that. So you can do just about any drawing that you want. If you want to make these a little bit darker, you can make a little bit darker. So I'm going to go in here and make these more shaped like an egg because they bled a tiny bit because I watered them in before I pressed them. And so now I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to change the shape of these to more like seeds. And I like how this is looking. I'm going to let this sit for 24 hours and then I'm going to come back and press it with an iron. And I love the way that this is looking. Like I said, I could pull this back if I wanted to and trim this off, but I kind of like the way it looks. No fruit is perfect and neither is this one. And so this, my friends, is my self-control block. It's my little 6.5 incher and it's going to go in there. I'm going to make at least one more and slide it in there. And then I'm going to be filling in my other blocks with these. And so next time that we're together, you're going to see all of these little blocks and you're going to see how I'm going to use these little fillers. And so my friends, this is it. We are at the end of this series. You guys have 2 weeks if you want to go back and do some of the other blocks. These are so much fun. I wanted to have a full project where I was using them. If you get the set that only has 12, they're not super expensive. If you can only afford one, I would get the blocks instead of the pencils, but they're both great. And I just need to make sure I put that one back. And this is everything that you need. You can mix these colors up to make new colors, but these are ink pencils and ink blocks, and these are great. All right, friends, this is all that I'm doing tonight. Please let me know if you want the pattern for the little tiny baby Dresdens to add to your quilt. These are going to be flowers on mine, and I'm going to add vines to them. So if you want some of these, please let me know, and I will add the pattern to that to the page. And that is it, my friends. This is what I'm working on. We are getting to the end. Let me show you my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me pull up the picture. All right, I'm sharing my desktop so you can see it. This is the finished quilt that we're going for. In here where it says love, faithfulness, peace, gentleness, there are some empty spaces that I'm going to fill in with some of those flowers and vines and other things. And I'm going to make at least 1 or 2 of those little self-control blocks to squeeze in there, but I hope that you have enjoyed it. Please catch up. If you go to the website and you look at what is on there, go to the Fruits of the Spirit. There are a bunch of lessons. There's like 10 of them. They don't take a long time. We have an applique fruit bowl. We have handouts for pomegranates and other fruit. You have letters for all of these, and it's going to be a cute quilt. Most of these blocks are going to sew up really lovely. And so if you want that Dresden panel, you just let Dresden pattern let me know, and I will make sure to get that to you guys. All right, this is it. Make yourself some cute little self-control blocks. Look at how cute that turned out. I like it. It's like pale yellow in the background. I'm glad I cut it out and I didn't just fuse something on top because it gives it more dimension. I like how that looks. I'm making these little blocks to add to my quilt, and I'm going to be adding these. All right, my friends, let me know what you want to make next. I have a quilt behind me that I was working on last time. It's called Stepping Stone. And then I have another quilt pattern that I'm working on for those of you who just want to work scrappy projects. So I've got some other things coming. Maybe an ocean-themed quilt for the summer. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm going to put some stuff out there and I'm going to let you guys vote, okay? All right, everybody, you guys have a wonderful week. I have a basketball tournament to go watch with my husband. I think he would like that. But I will see you guys later, and I will make sure that I put everything that you guys need up on the website. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks to finish this quilt up, okay? Have a wonderful evening. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope your team wins and your bracket is not busted. All right, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a good one. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Bye, everybody.